Good morning. Welcome to the National Archives' second virtual genealogy fair. I'm David Ferriero, Archivist of the United States. Last year, we decided to make the genealogy fair a virtual one so that we could serve you, our audience, in a broader way. It worked. In fact, more than 5,000 of you viewed one lecture alone. This proved to us that we truly can bring the National Archives to you, no matter where you are in the world. Today, we have the National Archives staff from around the country, as well as guest speakers making presentations about using records from our holdings to help you discover your own family's history. Here at the National Archives, we make history come to life. We have over 12 billion pages of records. Many of them are of special interest to genealogists, such as census schedules, passenger arrival lists, records of naturalizations, and land and military files. Each day in our research rooms across the country, people comb through these records to piece together details of their own family histories. But for the next 3 days, we'll be here virtually to teach you about our genealogical records, and we'll help you discover your history. We're featuring lectures about records relating to Native Americans, the Civil War, military and early Veterans Administration personal data records, and the Selective Service. Each record, large or small, is a representation of a greater story, many of which are still being told today in daily life. Our preservation staff will advise you on the care of your family records. Two of our digital partners, Ancestry and Family Search, will demonstrate how to access NARA records on their web pages. During the fair, we are on Facebook and Twitter. You can follow the National Archives on Twitter using the hashtags shown on the screen. I'm grateful to the staff of the National Archives, particularly our Customer Services Coordinator, Diane Dimkoff, and her team, Andrea Matney and Rebecca Sharp. And I want to especially acknowledge all the presenters across the nation. Shortly after the end of the fair, the recorded lectures and materials will be available on the Genealogy Fair's webpage at the URL on your screen. You'll be able to tune in and watch as many times as you like. Thank you very much and enjoy the fair.
Good morning. My name is Diane Dimkoff, and I am the Research Customer Support Coordinator for the National Archives. Welcome to the first day of the 2014 Virtual Genealogy Fair. I hope that you'll be able to join us for the 3 days and can do it in your bunny slippers. A few quick notes before we start. As the archivist said, you can submit your questions for a speaker via Twitter using hashtag GenFair, GenFair 2014. Since we have a very tight schedule for the next few days, the speakers may not be able to answer all of the questions during their allotted 10-minute Q&A. Please reach out to us via email at inquire@nara.gov and send your questions in that way. For captioning, go to the Virtual Genealogy Fair website and click on the link for today. The lectures will be recorded, as the archivist said, and the Virtual Genealogy Fair on the Virtual Genealogy Fair website by the end of November. The first session starts in just a second. If you're following from home, this is session number 1. The lecture is entitled Introduction to Genealogy, and our speaker is Claire Kluskens. During this presentation, you will learn how to do basic genealogical research using federal records at the National Archives. Claire Kluskens is a genealogy projects archivist specializing in immigration, census, military, and other records of high genealogical value. She works at the National Archives in Washington, D.C., and I'm now going to turn the microphone over to Claire.
Good morning. In this hour, we're going to talk about getting started on your genealogical research. We can't cover everything in 1 hour, of course, and other speakers will cover other topics that I won't have time for. You'll find that genealogy is a lifetime hobby that makes history relevant in many ways. Our ancestors' lives were influenced by geography, economics, politics, social customs, religion, climate, and many other factors. It is important to read about the history of the times in which your ancestors lived so that you better understand when and why they were doing the things that they were doing. Here is one example. Geography, economics, climate, and religion all came together in the year 1817, which was a watershed year for many families. In the northern United States, the year 1816 had been the year without any summer, when snow fell every month of the year. Farmers planted crops once, twice, 3 times, and the plants perished each time due to frost. Livestock starved. Life was very hard, and people flocked to churches to repent and seek deliverance. When spring finally came in 1817, many people from New York, Vermont, and other eastern states moved west to Ohio and beyond to start over in a new place. Knowing this history helps put flesh on the bones of your ancestors. In getting started with your research, begin with yourself. Get organized, get your tools. Set aside a specific box or binder in which to keep your notebooks, paper, ancestor charts, family group sheets, and other supplies. Some people use genealogy computer programs to organize their data. Other people, such as myself, use word processing programs to write our ancestors' stories. Fill out an ancestor chart such as the one shown on the screen. This will help you organize what you know about your ancestors and show where you have gaps in knowledge. Fill out a family group sheet for each ancestor and each ancestor's siblings. This will also help you organize what you know and what you don't know. Organize any old family papers you may have. Study them carefully for information and clues. The next speaker, Mary Lynn Ritzenthaler, will give you practical advice on preserving your family documents for future generations. Interview your relatives. They may know names, dates, places, and family stories that you don't know, and may be able to share copies of old family records that you don't have. Remember to write down the family stories, family traditions, life in the olden days, because those experiences are precious and will help make your ancestors people, not just names. Write down the details while older family members are still alive to tell you. Some of the basic starting points to identifying your ancestors are their names, of course, along with the names of their siblings and other relatives. Don't just focus on finding great-grandpa. Knowing who great-grandpa's siblings are may prove very useful. If you have trouble identifying great-grandpa's parents, knowing who his siblings may provide the key to solving the mystery and getting around that brick wall. Dates and places of birth, marriage, death, divorce, and burial all help tie your ancestor to a particular event at a particular place. This is very important because there were many people who had the same or similar name. Other biographical details such as occupation, military service, religious affiliation, and so forth help fill in the picture. You need to link the information together. A name by itself is not enough. You need to link the name to a specific location or event on a specific date, and the source of that information. You will find conflicting information from different sources. Knowing where the information came from will help you assess the accuracy and credibility of the information you find. Let me give 2 examples. Fred T. Brown's death certificate says he died in 1921. The death certificate was filed in 1921 in the Vital Records Office soon after his death. It's likely to be accurate. His gravestone says he died in 1922. It's likely the gravestone was put up in 1922 or perhaps even years later. The gravestone date is clearly not accurate in this case. Sarah M. Hafer died on April 3, according to the newspaper death notice published a few days later. The information was provided by the family. The death record filed at the county courthouse says she died on April 2. The record at the courthouse may have been filed some weeks later by the doctor, and he might have made a mistake. He might have arrived on the evening of the 2nd, but perhaps the death occurred after midnight. That's speculation. In this case, it is a little more difficult to discern which date is right. Join genealogical societies. The National Genealogical Society, the State Genealogical Society in the state where you live, and the states where your ancestors lived, the County Genealogical Society of the county in which you live, and the counties where your ancestors lived. There are also ethnic and surname genealogical societies that may be relevant to you. Why do all this? These societies have newsletters and other publications that have information useful to you. The publications are also a place for you to publish your family's story to preserve all that hard work you will do researching your ancestors. These publications have information about the area's history, records, research facilities, and more. They provide an opportunity to network with other people researching family history who are interested in the same area. An opportunity to network with more experienced researchers who can give good advice. Many of these societies provide education, conferences, classes, research trips, and other training opportunities. Publish or your research perishes. I do mean this seriously. Too many times, far too many times, the genealogist of a family dies and then that person's spouse or children who don't care about genealogy throw out all the research notes that person had. All that hard work lost when it might well help other people researching the same family, people you don't know who are distant cousins, descended from a different branch of the family tree. You will spend hundreds of hours, maybe thousands of hours researching your family. Write your family story. Publish stories about your ancestors in county, state, and even national genealogical publications. Make sure that copies of what you write are shared with other family members, libraries where your family lived, and libraries with national genealogical collections. The idea of writing scares many people. Don't let it scare you. If you can talk, then you can write. That's how today's talk was written, speaking it to myself at my computer and then typing it. You can do the same with your family's story, one sentence at a time. Learn how to do genealogy right. It sounds funny to say it, but you want to get the right ancestors. Too many times, beginners assume that a person with the name they are looking for is their ancestor, when it's actually a person with the same name and not their ancestor. So borrow books on genealogy from the public library. Read genealogy blogs on the internet. Take genealogy classes offered by your local genealogical society or adult education programs. Follow the research standards recommended by the National Genealogical Society. Making real progress in tracing your family tree comes from doing research in records. The federal, state, county, local government, and other entities such as cemeteries, churches, and private organizations have all created records of various kinds. Libraries have books of published records, newspapers on microfilm, and much more, including online databases. Remember that when you are doing research in archival records, the name may not be spelled how you expect to find it. Names were usually written according to the ear test. What did the census taker or other record keeper think was said? He probably didn't ask how it was spelled, and many people were illiterate and could not even spell their own name anyway. So you need to be flexible. An unusual or foreign name might be mangled by someone who didn't speak the language. Flexibility is key. Western with a U might be Western with two E's, or as Weston. Hayford might be spelled Hefford, Hafford, or Hayford with an E. A Bohemian name like Simmel might be spelled with the different vowels or even as Chimmel. A Scottish or Scots-Irish name like McCullough might have been written down as McAlley because it might have sounded like that when spoken. Here at the National Archives, we have records created by the federal government. These include the census, taken every 10 years from 1790 to 1940, military service and pension records, military unit records, draft registration records for the Civil War, World War I, and World War II and later, immigration records of aliens arriving from 1820 to the 1950s at seaports and land border ports of entry, naturalization records which document an alien becoming a U.S. citizen, and many other possibilities depending on how your ancestor interacted with the federal government. Census records are basic building blocks. They place your family in a particular place at 10-year intervals. Start with the 1940 census and work your way backwards. Find everyone in the entire extended family in every census. That will help you get a complete picture of the family and work your way around brick walls. Remember that indexes, whether they are on the computer or in book form, were created by humans, and humans make mistakes. The 1940 census is the most recent census available. Census records are restricted for 72 years to protect people's privacy, so the 1950 census will not be available until 2022. Census records are available online on commercial genealogy websites such as Ancestry.com, HeritageQuest.com, and FamilySearch.org. What if you can't find the person using an index? Try spelling the name a different way. Or if you know where the person lived, read the census for that town page by page, line by line. The census is arranged geographically by state, then by county, then by local jurisdiction. People don't live in alphabetical order. The 1870 through 1940 censuses include the name, age, gender, race, marital status, occupation, and birthplace of each person. The 1880 through 1930 censuses include the birthplace of each person's parents. Birthplace is given as the state or country of birth. In each census, there are a few additional questions asked. For example, the 1930 census asked if the household had a radio set, which was the wild new technology of that time. The 1850 and 1860 censuses listed every free person by name with their age, gender, race, marital status, occupation, and birthplace. For 1850 and 1860, there are also slave schedules that give the name of the slave owner and list the number of slaves by age and gender. For 1790 through 1840, the census lists the name of the head of the household, then the number of household members by gender and age categories. Numbers of slaves by gender and age are also given. While this is less information, it does at least outline the family. Details will have to be obtained from other sources. Now for the next few minutes, we will do a sample census search for an African American family from Watauga County, Alabama. I did this research several years ago in preparation for an African American genealogy conference. I chose the family at random, and I don't personally do any research in Alabama, so I was starting this research blind, started with nothing. At the time, the 1930 census was the most recent one available, so I chose Jesse Washington and his family. Jesse and his wife Ella with their children, Harry, Dottie, Betty, Arch, Quince, and Albert Walker, a grandson. Here is the 1930 census image with their names, relationship to the head of the household, gender, race, age at last birthday, marital status, age at first marriage, whether they attended school during the previous year, whether they can read or write, birthplace, birthplace of father and mother, occupation and industry, and whether a military veteran. It also asks whether the home is owned or rented and whether the household has that new technology, the radio set. So with this information, I then searched the 1920 census. It turns out that the man's first name was Joe, not Jesse, but they were living in the same area in the same county. So we had Joe, his wife Ella, with their children Ida, Anna, Eddie, Foster, Lula, William, Harry, Dolly, Baumista, who was Betty in 1930, Archie, Quincy, and Albert, who is this time called a stepson. The children whose names are in italics on the screen are those who we found on the 1930 census, which helps confirm this is the right family. As I mentioned, Albert is called a stepson instead of a grandson in this census. His actual relationship would have to be determined from other records. Notice that the parents' ages are 45 and 40 instead of the expected 53 and 48 based on the 1930 census. Names, ages, birthplaces, everything on the census has to be taken with a grain of salt. You have no idea whether the information was provided by an adult who could remember the correct information, or a 16-year-old child. The information content is similar to the 1930 census with relationship to the head of the household, age, gender, race, marital status, birthplace, occupation, and industry in which the person works. Also, is the home rented or owned? Does it have a mortgage? For aliens, it asks the year of arrival in the United States, if they are an alien or naturalized citizen, and the year of naturalization. Citizenship status is shown by AL for aliens, PA for first papers, and NA for naturalized. We'll talk more about naturalization in a little while, and other speakers will provide more details about naturalization later in the genealogy fair. So now to the next block, building block, the 1910 census. The family was still in the same area. So we have Joe and Ella with their children, Ida, Clarence, Anna, Eddie, Foster, Lula, William, and Harry. Again, the children whose names are in italics on the screen were seen on later censuses. Again, the parents' ages are 36 and 35 instead of the expected 35 and 30 based on the 1920 census. And here is the 1910 census image. The family starts at the bottom of one page and continues on to the next. So please, if your family starts at the bottom of one page, do look at the next one to see if they're continued on it. The 1910 census is similar to the 1920, with relationship to the head of the household, gender, race, marital status, birthplace of mother and father, occupation and industry in which the person works. Also, whether the home or farm is rented or owned, and if owned, is there a mortgage? The 1910 census also asked married people about their marriage, whether it is their first or second or third or more. Also, the number of years this couple has been married. For women, the number of children to which they have given birth, and the number still living. This will help you figure out whether you have identified all the children belonging to a particular family. Also, the number of weeks the person was out of work in 1909, whether a military veteran, and whether blind in both eyes. When the census schedules were sent to Washington, the clerks at the Census Bureau who were involved in tabulating the data for statistical purposes scrawled a bunch of numbers and letters over the top of the far right-hand columns for the computers to use. The computers were people, usually women, who entered the data into tabulating machines. Those scribbles are not useful to you, so don't worry about them. So now going back to the 1900 census, I found Joe and Ella were still in the same county with their first few children. So we have Joe and Ella and Clarence Idley and George. Again, those in italics are children who appear on later censuses. One of the cool things about the 1900 census is that it gives you the month and year of birth. In many places, this may be as close to a birth date as you will find. Many states, particularly in the South, did not start keeping birth records until the early 1900s. So here is the 1900 census image, which includes the relationship to the head of the household, race, gender, month and year of birth, age at last birthday, marital status, number of years married, number of children born to each woman, and the number still living, birthplace of father and mother, occupation, whether they can read or write and speak English, and whether the home or farm is owned or rented, and whether there is a mortgage if it is owned. I'll point out here that Joe and Ella have been married for 5 years according to the 1900 census, and I'll get back to that in a moment. So now, ideally, we would go to the 1890 census. Unfortunately, in 1921, there was a fire in the Commerce Department building that resulted in the destruction of most of the 1890 census. Census schedules for a little over 6,000 persons survive and are available, but none of these relate to this family. So now we have to make the 20-year leap from 1900 to 1880, which is something most people have to do. It can be challenging without adequate information. In this example, I had very little information about Joe Washington, and I was not successful in finding him in the small time I had to search using online indexes. He should be on the census somewhere, however, and potential strategies are to search the census for that county page by page, line by line, focusing on first names. He might, however, be in a different county. He might have a different surname than Washington, which was often true with former enslaved persons. The family name wasn't always settled on until the 1880s or even later. It would be helpful to find names of his parents and siblings in other records so that there would be more than one target person to look for. With Joe, we would hopefully find him in somebody else's household. His age range is variable based on later census records. In 1880, he would be somewhere between age 5 and age 13. So lacking easy success with Joe, I turned my attention to his wife, Ella. A genealogist put online an index to old marriage records in that county, and so I found that in the Autauga County Marriage Records, Volume 9, page 48, is a record of Joe Washington and Ella Livingston getting married in 1895. Remember what I said about the 1900 census? It showed that they had been married 5 years, which, if that was accurate, would be 1895. Looks like that was accurate. Here's the online index I found. Joe and Ella were married on Valentine's Day, 1895. This is not the record. The record is at the courthouse, and if this was your family, you would want a copy of the record, which should indicate the name of the officiating minister or justice of the peace and perhaps other information. The information included in marriage records kept by counties depended upon the state and when the marriage occurred. Earlier records will have less information. Later records will have more information. So with Ella Livingston, I was again working with little information. I assumed she would be in Autauga County in 1880. Her age, based on later census records, was going to be somewhere between 2 and 8 years old. So here's what I found on the 1880 census. In Prattville in Autauga County, the family of Hill Livingston, age 45, with Mary, his wife, Melissa, and their children, Melissa, George, Archie, Clara, Hilliard, Ella, Edgar, and Hattie. Notice that all these children's names are familiar. They were some of the same names given by Joe and Ella Washington to their children, so this looks like a pretty good match. Ella is 6 years old, which is within the target age range. Her father's name, Hill, is probably short for Hilliard, which was also the name of one of Ella's brothers. Going backward now to the next building block, the 1870 census, and here's the 1880 census image. I apologize for not showing you that earlier. And again, this family starts at the bottom of one page and continues on to the next. So I went back to 1870. I found a likely match, Hilliard Livingston, age 33, in Prattville in Autauga County. But where was his wife and children? Starting at the bottom of the page and continuing to the next is Mary Alexander, age 30, with her children, Melissa, George, Arch, Clarence, who is 9 months old, 9/12, which makes it September 1869. His birth month is specified as September, and that would be September 1869, not 1870. And listed at the end of the family is the apparent husband and father, Hilliard Livingston, age 33. It was very common for in the African American community that surnames were still in a state of flux. The difference in surnames used by Mary and Hilliard might be that they had had different slave owners. By 1880, they had settled on the Livingston surname, but not yet in 1870. No matter what your ethnic background, if you find a family member living with some other family, don't ignore it. It is possible the family is related. It was also common for young people to find employment with a neighboring family, so sometimes there is no relationship at all. So this sequence of census research took a family from 1930 all the way back to 1870. The same process would be used to trace white families and free families of color from 1860 backwards, although, as mentioned earlier, the details of the first 5 censuses from 1790 to 1840 are much sketchier. We'll now leave census records and turn our attention to other records in the National Archives. Records relating to military service are another important source for family history research. I will mention these briefly because other speakers will be talking about them in more detail. Compiled military service records are available for soldiers who served in volunteer units from the American Revolution through the Philippine Insurrection. They are called compiled military service records because from the 1880s through about 1915, the Adjutant General's office had clerks go through all the muster rolls, payrolls, and other records and copy the information onto cards, such as these seen here, which were then placed into a jacket, also seen here, so that nearly all the information about a soldier's service is available in one place. Do not expect 21st century style records. In the 18th and 19th centuries, the military didn't ask who your parents were or who your spouse was. The only thing that was important was basic health. Could you walk and carry a gun? As indicated in the handout, digital images of CMSRs are available online at fold3.com for the Revolutionary War and Civil War, Confederate states and certain Union states, CMSRs for veterans of the War of 1812, Mexican War, Spanish-American War, and Philippine Insurrection must be ordered from the National Archives or viewed in the National Archives building. More information about compiled military service records was given in lectures during the 2013 National Archives Virtual Genealogy Fair, and that can be found on our website. Military pension records for soldiers and sailors who served from the Revolutionary War through the Philippine Insurrection are also available. More information about pension records can be found on our website, as well as lectures given during the 2013 National Archives Virtual Genealogy Fair on our website. There are draft registration records for the Civil War, World War I, and World War II, and later. Speakers on Wednesday and Thursday will talk in depth about draft records and other 20th century military records. Another important source of information for genealogists are the immigration records, which document the arrival of aliens at U.S. seaports and land border ports of arrival. Ship passenger lists are available for vessels arriving from 1820 to the 1950s. Records of aliens crossing the Canadian border from 1895 to the 1950s and at the Mexican border from 1903 to the 1950s are also available. Many of these records can be found online on Ancestry, Family Search, and other websites. To give you an example of what passenger lists look like, here is a page from the passenger list of the Inca, a bark that arrived at Baltimore, Maryland on July 14, 1873. A bark is a three-masted sailing vessel like that pictured here. The passenger list includes the name of the ship, the date and port of arrival, the port that it departed from, and its type and size. For each passenger, it gives the name, age in years and months, gender, occupation, nationality, that's the country of origin, destination, which is usually given as the United States, whether the person died on the voyage, and whether the person was a passenger in the first cabin, second cabin, or steerage. The names and other information on passenger lists was written by employees of the ship company, not U.S. immigration officials. Later records have more information. Here's an example from 1902. The steamship Castle arrived at Baltimore, Maryland on August 20, 1902. This list has each passenger's name, age, gender, occupation, whether able to read or write, nationality, town of last residence, final destination in the United States, whether they had a ticket to their final destination, how much money they brought with them, and the name and address of a relative or friend in the United States. So that helps you link them to other people they knew that were already here. Most of the records generated at the Canadian and Mexican border were made on cards such as this one for Oblester Zapata, who arrived at Laredo, Texas on Christmas Eve, 1925. The information collected at the land borders was the same information, generally the same information as that collected at seaports. Turning now to naturalization records. Naturalization records document the process by which an alien becomes a United States citizen. This was a voluntary act. No one was required to become a citizen. 2 years after the alien's arrival, he could declare his intent to become a U.S. citizen. 3 years after that, he could then petition for naturalization. These two steps could be done in any court of record, whether at the county, state, or federal level. The two steps could be done in different courts, even in different states. Record keeping varied widely before September 1906. Beginning in September 1906, there were more standardized procedures and record keeping, and this subject will be covered in more depth by other lecturers. Other federal records may be useful to you. It all depends on how your ancestors interacted with the federal government, whether your ancestor was a freedman in the post-Civil War era, or maintained an affiliation with a federally recognized tribe, or was a federal employee, such as a postmaster, or bought land from the federal government, or obtained land through homesteading or due to a military bounty land warrant. Remember that state governments have kept records such as vital records. Birth and death records have been kept by state vital records offices since the early 1900s, usually with a copy at the county. Remember, there are many county records useful for genealogical research, including vital records, land records, tax records, criminal and civil court records, naturalization records, probate records, and voter registration records. And finally, remember to visit your public library, especially in the counties where your ancestors lived, because of unique local resources available there. In closing, I'd like to say, best wishes for success in your research. There is always more to learn about your family. Stay organized. Write your family's history as you go along. Increase your skills as a researcher through education by reading and attending lectures such as the ones in our genealogy fair. Remember that names are not always spelled as you expect to find them, and different records may give conflicting information. Thank you for your attention today, and I look forward to answering some of your questions.
Thank you, Claire. If the speaker does not get to your question, please, this is a reminder to please send an email to inquire@nara.gov. Claire, we have several questions for you. First one is, I'm missing a lot of relatives in Virginia on the 1930 census. How did the Depression affect whether someone appeared on the census that year?
Well, the census had the goal of enumerating everyone on the census. Having said that, certainly there are people that do get missed on the census. If the person is researching online, I suggest that they not just rely on the indexes, but look at the actual census records for the area where the person lived, which they can do online, but to actually search those page by page and line by line to make sure that the person is there but has not been indexed incorrectly.
Okay, thank you. Another question regarding mortality schedules. Did they do that the same day and time as the actual census?
I believe that yes, the answer is yes. Certainly, most of the time, the answer is yes. The enumerator who in 1850, 1860, and 1870 was a U.S. Marshal basically was carrying around several clipboards, if they had clipboards in those days, and would take the information on Schedule 1, which was the census record, and then move on to asking the same person the questions for the mortality, agriculture, and manufacturing schedules. In 1880, when the Census Bureau had was bigger, well, it actually existed and it was bigger and had its own people doing the jobs instead of the federal marshals, they frequently, at least for the manufacturing schedule, had special agents go into the cities to collect the data for the manufacturing schedule. But for the agricultural schedule, certainly the same information, the information on that schedule was being collected by the same people, same enumerators enumerating the population.
Thank you. The next question is in regard to the 1890 census. I just heard that you have 6,000 names that didn't burn. How do we find out those names and location?
Okay. The 1890 census was microfilmed by the National Archives many years ago, and you will easily find it on online websites such as Ancestry and Heritage Quest and probably other places.
Thank you. Why were people asked if they had a radio in one of the census?
Well, I haven't read all the background administrative records for how and why they decided to ask certain questions on the various censuses, but one of the things the Census Bureau does every year is to sort of gauge new trends in what's going on in the nation, and certainly in 1930, radio was the hot new technology, and apparently somebody really wanted to know how that was catching on with the American population.
The next question, when will additional immigration lists go online? I know there may be a 50-year policy, but we only have New York until 1957.
Yes, there is a 50-year policy that immigration records are withheld from general public view for 50 years. The National Archives has published some additional immigration records as microfilm publications, and those are in many cases available on Ancestry.com. And we also have an agreement with Ancestry that going forward, that more and more of the immigration records, as they reach that 50-year point, will be going up online on Ancestry. As to New York specifically, I do not know when New York will go online, and perhaps our staff could get back to you on that if you send us an email.
The next question, how do you get access to the routes the census takers took while taking the censuses so that you can find the actual house the family was residing in at that time?
Well, that's a good question, and that's something that far too many people don't do a whole lot of. Obviously, first you're going to need a map of the area, and you can find old maps in various places, including the tax assessor's office will have old maps that are based on tax records. You'll find old maps published in county histories. Even if you used a USGS map, that's United States Geological Survey map, from 50 years ago, it's probably pretty close to what things were like, 50 years before that, 100 years before that. But the key thing is, first you have to figure out where at least one house is on that map, and some of the old maps that were published in county histories and other things often will point out where different people were living. And once you've at least figured out where someone was living, then you can at least start from that house and sort of work your way down the road. You're never going to know exactly, based on the census, where somebody was living. So your other possibility are county real property records, the deeds that people filed when they bought and sold land, and those deeds, which are filed in the county recorder's office or the equivalent agency, different places call them different things, will tell you exactly where in the county that land that the person owned was. Now, if they weren't a landowner, that gets a little more difficult. So you have to figure out where your family who was renting was physically in relation to a nearby landowner.
Thank you. Next question. I wish I could go to NARA and enter a soldier name or number and get all records. Is it difficult to find people on NARA websites?
Our website has a lot of information, but it certainly does not have all of the information that is in the records in our custody, and including even all the things that we've microfilmed over the years. The questioner didn't mention which war they were interested in particular, so it's hard to come up with a general answer for that. But in general, there are, we'll talk 19th century here, indexes to people who served in the wars of the various wars, and then indexes to people who obtain military pensions based on those wars. And you can find those indexes online on places like Ancestry.com. And so you can go right to your public library, and most public libraries in the United States have a subscription to Ancestry.com that you can use for free inside your public library.
Thank you. Is it possible to check paper passenger lists? My ancestor was on the Germans to America index, but not on the microfilm.
Okay. If your ancestor is in the Germans to America index, they are on the microfilm. And I'm not sure why you're having difficulty finding them on the microfilm, but rest assured they are there because the folks that did Germans to America were using the records that we have in our custody, and may very well have been using the microfilm for all I know. If you still can't find the person in the microfilm, send us an email and we'll try and respond to you more specifically. The 20th century passenger lists do not survive anymore because those records were destroyed after microfilming. Microfilming was considered a space-saving, money-saving technology, because if governments microfilmed their records and then destroyed them, you could store a whole lot more records in a small space of a roll of microfilm than you would in many, many thousands of cabinets. So that was done to save our ancestors their tax money. There are 19th century passenger lists that still do exist, however, and those generally are now at our regional archives.
We have quite a long list of questions yet, so hang in there, Claire. How do I find information about Irish relatives? I got to the port of departure, but it all stops there.
Okay, I'm not an expert in Irish research, and so you might want to find a family history society, genealogy society that focuses on Irish research. At the national conferences, the National Genealogical Society Conference or the Federation of Genealogical Society Conference, I believe they usually do have speakers that talk about doing research in Ireland, and those would be worthwhile for you to attend. In order to do research in Ireland or any foreign country, you really need to know where specifically in Ireland or that foreign country that the person lived in. And so you need to find that information here in America first, really, before you can have success abroad. But I really recommend you get in contact with folks that are specialists in those types of research.
Thank you. The next question. How do you get access to the routes the census takers took while taking the censuses so that you... Oh, we did this one. I'm so sorry. Can individuals get later census records of their immediate family?
1950 and later census records are, restricted, as I said, from public access. In answer to that question, I recommend that you contact the Bureau of Census. They have a form that you can fill out to request very minimal information from the census, but I'm not familiar with their requirements. But go to census.gov, and I'm sure that you'll find information about that. Search under FOIA, Freedom of Information Act, on the Census Bureau website.
Okay. A quick note to several people who've written in. The handouts are available at archives.gov, and search for Virtual Genie Fair. And I think that wraps us up, Claire. Thank you very much. If the speaker did not get to your question, please send an email to inquire, INQUIRE, at nara.gov, and we'll look forward to answering those questions for you.